Okay, let's start this podcast, man. Episode number
Yeah,
one.
Abstract
So I'm
Apes.
very excited for this project. We have thought about starting a podcast for over a year now, and after months of discussions and planning, it's finally live. So the idea behind this podcast is really about having meaningful, open-minded, and interesting conversations, which cover a range of topics from science, philosophy, and self-actualization. So in our conversations, we will be discussing books, scientific research, and our own personal experiences as well as many other ideas. Right? In essence, we attempt to deliver an essay through these discussions. Okay, what I find very exciting is the way in which we will develop over time and the possibility of changing our minds and growing from these open conversations.
Yeah, and I think another very important aspect of this podcast is going to be how we're going to develop our eloquence and our speaking skills. And we're going to become a lot more articulate and concise in our speech. I think that's going to help with any public speaking that we have to do in the future and a lot of these really useful oratory skills. So it's also important for my personal goals, such as achieving clarity of mind, and I think yours as well.
For
We're
sure.
trying to kind of tame the monkeys in our minds and try to answer challenging questions that keep us basically up at night. And for me, though, with all benefits considered, this podcast is not really result oriented. The perks you get out of it, as I said, improved eloquence, patience, they're all great, but in the end, it's just about setting a habit. It's about being disciplined. It's about being accountable to the other person and to learn and study together, to explore ourselves through the exploration of each other. And every time we have a new episode, we will aim to research new books, research new material, and improve ourselves. It's going to be a really great learning experience, in my opinion.
Amazing. Yeah. That's why I'm looking forward to all these episodes. It's also a project that kind of keeps you going, always studying, always trying to get new ideas. And regarding that, what we're aiming with this project, we have a quote here from Jordan Peterson. So here he's our semi-cult leader, right? Both me and Penef are a big fan of his. And the quote goes like this: Stop trying to use your speech to get what you want. You don't necessarily know what you want. Try to articulate what you believe to be true as carefully as possible. Then accept the outcome.
So how do you
Oof,
so how do
right?
you actually understand the speech?
Well, especially the last bit, then accept the outcome. This is like try and be radically honest. Try and be skeptical. Try and be as reasonable as possible. And then whatever comes out of those arguments, accept it and live by it. So it might not be it's necessarily what you think now. You have to be very open minded to do that, and it's definitely not an easy task. What do you
What
think?
about the tangents that you go on sometimes? I have discussions with great friends that sometimes we start talking about a really in-depth topic, something that's very important to both of us, and then all of a sudden we go on a tangent and we reach some conclusion that maybe I don't personally believe in. Do I have to accept the outcome again?
Well, no, that's why you are open to new evidence and new arguments perpetually, right? So you also have to examine that conversation because every time you're speaking to someone, you're not necessarily following every single step. You need to go back then examine. Well, is this conclusion? Does this conclusion even make sense? So yeah, not necessarily. You shouldn't accept every single conclusion that comes out of your
Okay,
conversations, of
yeah, I
course.
really like that actually. You know, getting the perspective of the other one is something that's really useful. I think we'll also become great listeners through this podcast and hopefully, accept the outcomes of what comes out of these discussions, but still
For sure,
critically
man.
examine it at the end. I think it's actually a great reason for why we're recording these discussions, just to be able to examine them afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. So when we have the recordings, maybe a couple months back, couple years back, we can always look back and see what we thought at the moment, where we are when we are in life, when we
Laugh,
are with our ideas.
laugh.
Hey, laugh, laugh.
No, laugh with
Okay,
ourselves
and
because it's going to be so funny. In 5 or 6 years, it's going to be so funny what we thought.
probably, or maybe maybe I would think, damn, I was like super
No, you
confident.
won't.
I want to
No,
have
you won't.
that. Okay, for the people who are first time listeners, the first episode, like anyway, let's explain the name. So we've chose Abstract Apes. What do we mean by that? So the name, except for making the logo intuitive, I'm really proud of the logo. It's designed by Penef himself.
Yes, that is not the
It
reason why we chose this name, though.
Yeah, except for making the logo intuitive and easy to make, it's really a symbol of our values and beliefs. So we think of ourselves as rational individuals striving for the best, but we still realize our limitations as imperfect apes. We aim to transcend our monkey minds and improve as intellectual beings, but for now we will humble ourselves with just apes. Hopefully, in the future, we will strive to become more human.
Yeah, I think it's also a really good mention that apes also considers the nature in us, and that includes both all the good things of nature and all our animalistic selves. So it's going to be hopefully a very critical podcast where we can analyze our personal views on things. And I actually saw a really good video the other day, and it mentioned that most of us are not actually good guys. We're just moderately bad guys. So it's actually really interesting how we're going to proceed with this and see how big of apes we are, or are we actually human beings?
Yeah, that reminds me of a title of a book on my to read list. So it's by Steven Pinker and it's called The Better Angels of Our Nature. So there he actually argues that despite all of our limitations and all our, for example, tribalist like intuitions, we always try to isolate ourselves in groups. Despite that, we have made progress. So I would consider myself being a positivist in this sense. So yeah, I don't agree that most of us are moderately. We do have some moderately evil parts, but overall, I think the trend is clear. We are becoming better
Yes,
as
absolutely
people.
agree with that actually. Like in recent years, especially with society, I think we've made tremendous progress. And I think this globalism has actually been really good, like a good thing
Hmm.
for humanity in general. Continuing on about the name of the podcast, I've noticed that our conversations are often very abstract and can become either very intriguing or tiresome, depending on your taste for philosophy. So it's
For sure.
mostly going to be abstract topics or some kind of self help, very pragmatic topic, how we're going to be applying the abstract principles that people talk about in philosophies like Stoicism and all these other great moral disciplines. And
Especially stoicism.
yeah, yeah. We're going to also explore others in the future, but Stoicism is definitely going to be one of the first episodes. At the end of the day, we're aiming at knowledge and understanding ideas that we can embed in reality and actually practice them instead of just blabbering for hours on end. While that is, I think, very useful to realize what's important and how we can apply those ideas in our real lives, I think that comes second after pragmatic uses, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the self actualization, self improvement component of this podcast. So we're not gonna always keep it abstract, keep it impractical. We would like to ground those ideas and actually see how we can apply them in our lives. Okay, should we start as well by introducing ourselves? So, who are the viewers listening to? Who are they
Who
watching?
are you, Danny?
Oh, who am I? I'm glad you asked, man. Okay, so I'm Daniel. I'm currently pursuing a physics degree at University College London, UCL. And my interests lie in the power of reason, the scientific method, and also more recently, topics such as self-improvement, morality, and progress. So big chunk there, pick what you like. And through this podcast, I'm looking to share many of those ideas and also to make sure that they're in a place where I can always go back, and revise them. And also, I'm very keen to use it as a self-reflecting and learning experience. So I hope to learn something from my friend Penef. I'm also hoping to learn something for myself. And this is all about me. So who is the other co-host?
So my name is Kaloyan, and I program games as an undergraduate at Bournemouth University. So I'm still trying to find my place in the world. I'm kind of torn between art and creativity, logic and programming, sport and exercise. I'm really just curious about the world. I'm trying to learn new stuff. I just love learning new things. And I think this podcast is going to give a great platform for both of us to really reflect on what we learn and discuss how we can apply it to our lives, how we can kind of learn from the other one, and how he kind of perceived our knowledge. So it's kind of going to be mutually expanding our knowledge through a discussion. And in my experience, it's always been great to talk to you. And let's enjoy the ride.
Let's go, bro. So for the first episode, right, we decided to choose a topic. This topic is habits. So you might see, like, I have a couple of books lined here. So they're not all the books I've read. I actually use a Kindle, which has been a great tool for downloading lots of new material. But the topic of habits is really interesting because you can argue that habits is all we do, right? Everything we do on a daily basis is mostly habitual. We have our daily routines. We have our like intuitions, emotions that always get triggered, and a lot of the times we're just acting out of habit.
Yeah, and I think with this podcast, we're actually aiming to make it a habit. And with it, it's like a super habit. And with it are going to come small habits, like studying the topic that we have chosen for this week and communicating better with the other person. And I think it's going to be a great platform for creating better habits. So I think it's very appropriate that our first topic is habits.
Yeah, amazing. And so in terms of what a habit actually is, like what's the mechanism behind a habit, the book, so one of the best books I've read about the habits is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And there he describes a very, very simple mechanism for habit forming. And that is the cue, the routine, and the reward. So something triggers you to do something, which is the routine, and then you get a reward for it, which re-enhances that pattern. And he applies this to everything, to whole societies, to businesses and organizations, and to individuals as well. But I know that you actually read Atomic Habits, which is another book, and it's more specific. It only applies to individuals. So what's the habit loop that's described there?
Yeah, so with Atomic Habits, it's actually a self-help book. While I think Power of Habit is more of a analysis book about the nature of habits. It's more habit-centered. While with James Clear, the writer of Atomic Habits, he focuses on the personal psyche and the behaviors of humans and how habits influence the behaviors of us and not whole societies. It's just you, your personal you. So he actually builds upon the habit formation formula of Charles Duhigg, and he goes cue, craving, response, reward. So he breaks up the routine into two. He makes the craving and response. So actually, Charles Duhigg already talks about the craving in Power of Habit, but James Clear kind of makes it more explicit. So he actually builds upon that book, and he actually acknowledges the book as one of the greatest habit books by the time he's writing the book. But yeah, he builds upon it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I have a question for you. So now that we have the foundation, what habits actually are, if you have to pick for you, for yourself, the three most important habits, the ones that you would like to stick to and to always improve on, what would they be?
I think improving on habits is kind of just making them stronger.
Is a habit by itself?
No, no, no. I think improving habits is just making them more habits, basically. They're making them stronger, reinforcing those neural links. So it's kind of just becoming more regular. And I think what habits I want to keep for maybe the rest of my life is exercise, the biggest one, obviously. Then eating habits. I think my eating habits are really great right now. And then probably morning routine. And we're going to talk about it later on in the podcast. But I think those three are my most important to have a really nice day. I think doing those three is just the formula for a good day.
Yeah. Exercise, especially. Like I agree. It's interesting how back in the 1920s, 1930s, if you were running, if you were just jogging, say in New York and places in America, people would stop you and ask you, like, who's chasing you? And then the scientific community came in. They said they conducted all this research. They showed that it's actually like it benefits you, and it took many years for people to start, for the whole society to adopt that habit of jogging, of going to the gym, of doing exercise. And just to add on that, I want to add one more habit on. So that's your list.
What about yours?
Yeah, so the morning routine, I would replace it with meditation. So that's a huge one for me. And I see meditation in the same way as I see the jogging back in the 1920s. It's still a bit esoteric, but the research is already out, and more people are joining in.
Yeah, so what's your meditation routine? Do you have a meditation routine?
Yeah. So it's part of the morning routine. I wake up, and then I do 10 minutes of meditation, followed by half an hour of reading, and then I go on about my day. If I'm not in a rush, if I don't have to be anywhere, I just go and do some exercise. If not, then I just go on to start doing my work.
I see. Well. Let's see if I have prepared a question for you, my friend. So, do you have any bad habits?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm still an imperfect ape.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are my bad habits?
Okay,
I
I
can
can
think.
give you some time to think, and I can mention mine first.
Yeah. So what are yours?
So, I've actually had a bit of a habit journey. So, a couple of years back, I actually had terrible habits. I didn't exercise, I didn't do anything to improve myself. I kind of just stagnated, kind of just played a lot of video games. And I will used to drink 2 liters of soda every day. And I've not had the bottle in a long time now. But let's go back. So, instead of working out, I had a kind of a video game addiction. And then kind of things started changing when I went into university. My work ethic kind of had to go up a little bit, and I realized it's not sustainable to have these really bad habits. So I kind of just realized, well, let's change these. But I still have a lot of bad habits, like the usual stuff, mostly chores, to be fair. I don't put away washed clothes after they dry out, or I don't clean plates immediately after I.
All these small
Yeah,
small
really
things
small
that.
things, but I'm genuinely very happy with where I am in the big scope of things. I think my work habits are okay, my exercise habits are okay, eating habits, all those huge paradigms that most of the habit books talk about, I think I have them under control.
Yeah, same. So I don't want to sound like overly confident or anything, but in terms of morning routine, what I think I should be doing and what I'm actually doing, I think I'm pretty in line. And I think that's a huge part for avoiding cognitive dissonance. I don't know if you've heard of that psychological phenomenon. So it's when you tell yourself something that's there's something you know you should do, and instead you don't do it. I don't know, maybe it's a small thing like not doing the laundry, it's there, you have to do it, up to very big things like starting the projects, finishing your work on time, and being a horrible, horrible procrastinator. You definitely don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think procrastinating is a habit?
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know if you can see, but the bottom book here is The End of Procrastination, which is a very tiny book, very very well written, very easily readable, and there it talks about how if you make procrastination the default, so you're always avoiding doing your work, then that becomes habitual. You identify with it. That becomes an ingrained habit in your brain, and it becomes harder and harder to break out of that routine. What do you think? Can procrastination be qualified
I
as a
think you
habit?
mentioned identity, and I think that's a really big part of it. James Clear actually talks a lot about identity formation and how habits form your identity in his book. So you kind of identify with the person who procrastinates. You kind of casting vote for procrastination. Hey, am I a person who procrastinates? And every time you procrastinate on something, you kind of cast votes for the person you are. So, yeah, I definitely think procrastination can be described as a habit. It is a very recurrent behavior that we do automatically. Most of the time, you just go into a procrastination spree subconsciously, and you kind of just
Mm-hmm.
start procrastinating for 2 minutes, and then 2 hours later, you're still procrastinating. So, I think getting into a procrastination mode can be described as a habit.
Yeah, for sure. That I'm on the same page as you on that one. Okay, and let's speak about the elephant in the room. So it's quarantine. A lot of the places have already lifted their borders, but me and Penef are still in the UK. So that means like nothing's open here. There's no pubs, no restaurants, no nothing for entertainment. So what kind of things have we been doing during quarantine? What kind of habits have we been forming? What about you?
Oh, okay. So, I think the quarantine has been really good for my habit routine. As in, I've been exercising a lot more often. I've been basically exercising every day. Since we have all this time, I also have had time for personal projects instead of just studying and working. And personal projects have been starting to learn how to draw, starting to learn how to journal, and a lot of self help techniques that I've kind of obsessed over for 2 or 3 weeks and then thrown away. And it's been kind of I'm very curious about all these self help techniques. I'm trying them out. I started running at the beginning of quarantine. I bought a book on breath work. I focused on breath work for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't keep at it, but my knowledge for breath work is now a lot more. And I think the quarantine has given me a lot of time, and I've used that time very well. I've had more time to cook and stuff like that. I've built these habits, and we'll see if I keep them up after the quarantine ends. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the big advantage for me to have so much free time. I was mainly focused on my exams, so my daily routine was focused around studying as much as I can. In the beginning, to be honest with you, it was kind of hard to concentrate. I couldn't concentrate for more than half an hour at a time, and I had to take constant breaks. But eventually, you do get used to it. Me and my sister actually created an office work in our living room. So to create that office environment to make it feel as if we are still, at work, we need to be productive. And that was great. The morning routine was something I worked on a lot. So the thing I told you in the beginning of the podcast, 10 minutes of meditation, 30 minutes of reading, and then start off my day. That has been tremendously useful because it kickstarts your day very well. It just you do it, and then you're ready to take on the day.
Yeah, and you actually mentioned the office environment, and I think that's something that is also mentioned in James Clear's book. So, how I can describe it from what I read is by creating this office environment with your sister, you kind of sign a habit contract. And a habit contract is you kind of accountable to the other person to go into the living room or whatever the room is with your clothes on, with your formal clothes on. So you kind of have an
Suit and tie.
accountability partner about dressing up. And that little habit, which is just dressing up, carries over into a work routine. All of a sudden, you're also responsible for working, because the other person is also working in the same room as you. And you kind of feel like you're betraying him. And that's a big part of why we follow habits. It's actually peer pressure. So before I go on a bit more for habit contracts, because I genuinely think this podcast is kind of a habit contract. We're kind of signing that we're both going to create
Yeah,
these
we're
habits.
we're we're taking each other
Yeah.
accountable.
So in the scope of peer pressure, have you had any habits created out of peer pressure in your life?
Yeah, so the first one that pops to mind is the only reason why I drink beer and I have tequila shots at bars is because of peer pressure. So not peer pressure in the sense of someone told me you gotta drink this. It's just that what my group did, right? So I used to go out when we were in Veliko Trnovo, our hometown, and this is what everyone did, right? We go in the pub. What do you order? Well, I have a beer. I don't like the taste of beer, but everyone's having it, so fuck it. And the same with tequila shots. Oh, what are we having? Tequila shots. Yeah, give me one of those. I don't know what it is. So, taking into account that I was quite young at the time, it did kind of stick now. I'm not an alcoholic. Don't worry about me. But the fact that I do those things when I'm in a pub environment, I assign purely to peer pressure. Okay, so
Okay, yeah.
jokes aside,
Yes.
have you had any experience with that with that kind of peer pressure?
So growing up in a household full of cigarette smokers, I have had tremendous peer pressure about smoking. And to be fair, my mom and dad will always tell you, well, the peer pressure was not to smoke. They were pressuring me not to smoke. They were going like, see how bad it is and stuff like that. And then I was always complaining about how smoky it is in the house. But to be fair, that did carry over. I think when you're a kid, you kind of subconsciously accept that it's okay to smoke. If you're raised in a household of smokers, you just grow up and you're very gullible. So at 16 years old, you're like, it's okay to smoke. So you try a cigarette, and all of a sudden, all of your friends are smoking. And so you try another one. And all of a sudden, when you go out, you're smoking 2 or 3 cigarettes. But happily, fortunately, I realized how dumb that was. And I have not smoked a cigarette in a long time now. But I'm still not scared of cigarettes. And I'm not really sure if I'm open minded about cigarettes or if I subconsciously believe that it's okay to smoke cigarettes.
Well, yeah, I don't think you should be fine with cigarettes because the research is very very clear. Like there's no dispute about the fact that cigarettes are bad for you, and if you can work on the habit of stopping yourself from smoking, if you happen to be a smoker, then you definitely should invest the time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have never had the habit of smoking. To be fair, I've never actually enjoyed smoking, except on 1 or 2 occasions. But what I'm trying to say here is it's not about habit formation, it's about peer pressuring somebody, and kind of social behaviors, recurrent social behaviors make that habit acceptable. And you can observe it with a lot of things. Smoking is a small thing. Drinking alcohol every day in Bulgaria, it's very recurrent behavior in
Hmm.
kind of middle-aged male adults. So I think we as a society make stuff acceptable for young kids, and I think we have to be a lot more responsible with that.
Yeah, I think we have been very, as a society, as a group, we've been very good at preventing younger people to start smoking. So the campaigns have been everywhere, and now less and less people start smoking at a younger age. It used to be a big thing back in probably the 90s or something when the research was
Yeah,
still coming
everyone was
in.
smoking.
But now we've definitely, yeah. Before it was the cool thing to do. Now you know that you're fucking up your life if
Yeah,
you're doing that a lot.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing, though, right? We don't choose our earliest habits; we imitate them. And my uncle started smoking when he
Hmm.
was 10 years old. How is he going to get off the cigarettes if he's been smoking for 40 years systematically every day? It's just a really
Yeah, there's gonna
reinforced
be
behavior.
there has to be a kind of event that's like a wake up call in his life to be able to break that habit, because it's who he is. Coming back to the point of identity, he determines himself as a person
A smoker.
who's a smoker.
He needs a paradigm shift to actually.
He needs a
Yeah.
paradigm shift for sure.
So, about that, if you have a paradigm shift, right, and all of a sudden you get this huge surge of motivation to stop doing something, do you think that going off motivation and using motivations as means to achieve a goal or stop a behavior is viable in contrast to using very small incremental changes in habitual patterns?
So I think in both books, Atomic Habits and The Power of Habit, the argument is you should start small, right? You should always begin with small steps and not put yourself in deep waters, because it's just not gonna stick. It's you've been doing that for the last, like, I don't know, 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is. You're not gonna change in a day completely as a person, because you've been building that up for the last 5 to 10 years. It's the same with losing weight. You know, don't don't think that you can just go on a diet for a month and then everything's gonna be fine. You need to change your lifestyle if your lifestyle includes eating Cheetos all day and laying on your couch. It's just not gonna happen. So to stress the importance on small changes, incremental changes is a big thing. What do you think about that? The difference between having the identity, changing your identity overnight versus making incremental steps.
I think the book Atomic Habits actually goes really in depth into that. So it's kind of when you get this surge of motivation and you get a paradigm shift or something like that, and all of a sudden you identify as somebody else, you might think that when you're rational, but when you're when you're in the default mode of your brain, when everything is happening subconsciously, you're basically kind of still the same old you. So by having small incremental changes, you kind of cast votes for that identity every time. So the best thing when you get the motivation surge is starting small, keeping up with a habit that is as small as possible and that can kind of lead you into better things. And in James Clear's book, he describes it as the 2 minute rule. So people that want to start going to the gym, go to the gym for 2 minutes and then you can leave. So make it a rule to just leave after 2 minutes. And he describes with anecdotal examples that in 1 week, somebody who has been going to the gym for 2 minutes, just working out for 2 minutes and then going home, they just start going like, well, I'm already at the gym, so I might as well just work out a little bit more. I'm here every day. So I know all these people. I can just work out for 5 minutes. And then you kind of get into this habit. And by having small incremental changes, instead of going for, I will have 1 week of dopamine detox, you can just go like, well, today I'm not going to watch any YouTube videos in bed.
Yeah, for sure. So that's very important to make those changes small and incremental. And if there's one thing that you take out of this episode on habits, it is that's the best strategy. Make sure that your goals are such that they don't cause you to um, to have an aversion towards your goals. So make sure that they are small enough for you to just go on and tackle them. As Penef said, You go to the gym and you tell yourself, okay, I'm gonna be there for 10 minutes. Whatever I do, I don't mind. You'll see that when you're there, you're just gonna, continue doing the exercises. It's not gonna be as hard. The harder thing is to actually convince yourself to go to the gym for 40 minutes. Don't do that if you've never been to the gym before. Just say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, small stuff, and eventually you're gonna build up and it's gonna work out.
Yeah, and when you mention goals, something else in the book, and I think in Power of Habit as well, is having goals as a driving force behind habit formation, and how if you stick with a goal, do you think a result oriented design of your life in general is good? Do you think saying to yourself, well, I can relax after I get something done, or something like that, in the smallest scope ever, just doing a chore and then saying to yourself, oh, I will be relaxed after I do this chore, and then let's discuss in a bigger scale with longer term projects?
Yeah, that's an amazing question, and I've actually thought about it a lot. I've read about it a lot. I think what you're talking about is the idea of personal vision. So your ultimate goal in life, or your small goals, small milestones. I think that you shouldn't become a goal junkie. What I mean by that is, don't think that when you buy that dream car, I don't know, that Tesla, maybe that's your
It
thing,
is.
or the
It is.
Cybertruck.
I do have to say
Yeah.
Tesla is my thing.
Or and don't think that when you buy this, your life is gonna be fine, right? This is a like a intermediate goal. You can have that as a motivation, but don't let that be the driving force. Your personal vision should be journey based. Your ultimate goals should answer the question: how would I like to spend my life? What activities would I like to be doing throughout my life? So it's never about the destination, it's about that journey throughout.
So, how do you think we can make the journey better? Give me an example in your life.
Yeah, so here's an example. If I have to speak about my personal vision, it would have to do a lot about like education, and also a lot about discussion and self-improvement. But that's a never-ending journey, right? So I'm not thinking in my head only when I become, as let's say, an academic professor, or only when I have read 50 books on this subject, am I going to be qualified enough, satisfied enough. I'm thinking, what steps do I need to take to reach that unreachable goal? For example, working on a project that has to do with, spreading secular scientific values in society. That will be a great example. Is that project ever complete? I don't think so. But it's the journey that's accompanying it that's important.
Yeah, you gotta stay hungry. I think that's the most important
You
part.
gotta stay
Yeah,
hungry.
you gotta stay hungry, and I think setting yourself up with goals instead of focusing on the process is kind of setting yourself up for failure. Because if you 99% of the time you will not achieve the goal that you have set for yourself. So I think not having big expectations, or actually if you don't have any expectations, you can't get disappointed. So I think it's just keep getting your reps in, just keep doing what you think is the best in the moment, make the correct choice for the person you are right now, and don't worry about if you're going to get that result or not. Because if you're completely focused on a long-term goal, if you're tunnel visioning a result that you want, you miss the small marbles in the corner of your eye. And sometimes that's the best opportunities. Sometimes getting that little side project like a podcast might result in an insane shift in your life. Who knows?
Yeah, and same thing. So that's a good idea to speak about the podcast. It's not a destination like, let's get 1,000 subscribers, let's get 1,000 views, whatever. No, we're here to have these discussions, to have fun, and if success follows, that's gonna be amazing. It's gonna be another dopamine hit. But other than like a dopamine hit, I don't think it would be any more satisfying than actually working on the project itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you want to kind of start wrapping it up? I think we can mention how we're going to
Yeah.
keep on with the format of the podcast, what we're going to do every week.
Yeah. So tell us, Penef, what's up? What's up next? How are we gonna plan it? What's the format? What are we doing here?
So we'll be releasing episodes and where we kind of discuss topics. And already said, the realm of science, philosophy, self-improvement, and spirituality, where we kind of review books or studies or data or anything like that. And we aim to just have a meaningful discussion, maybe debate, and just try to build upon our knowledge. So every week we're going to have a different topic, and those topics will probably include in the following episodes existentialism. That's a big one. I think we're both very interested in that. Then morality, all the
Oh, that's a big one for me.
yeah. So that's you can talk about it.
Yeah. So morality. As an atheist, how do you reconcile morality? What between like the difference between right and wrong? This is a question that I've gone into a lot of depth. So reading books like Sam Harris's The Moral Landscape, Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, and all these other authors, thinkers that have ideas on it. And I'm just trying to get my head around this. So it's a topic that is really interesting.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. And I think morality really links up well with philosophy. I think morality is something that great minds have explored since ancient times. And I think a great school of thought for that is the Stoicism. So Stoicism is kind
Yeah.
of
So Stoicism. Stay tuned
yeah,
for that.
Stoicism is kind of a big interest of mine. At least back in the beginning of the year, I kind of focused a lot on it. It helped me a lot in my daily life. It kind of brought me a lot of inner peace. So we'll definitely talk about that and probably other scientific topics.
Yeah. Okay. We hope you enjoyed this episode. As I said, stay tuned and let's see where it takes us.
Yeah. Okay.
Goodbye.
See ya.